4, 3, 2, rewind.
Rise of the Fallen MMO Quest Pantheon. Once again, time to pledge. Very excited. We're here to talk. Let's get this party to
share your thoughts.
Co-host Therek.
Weekly adventures. Co-host Desiree. We're almost professional.
Full disclosure.
Dangerous combination. Creating content and optimizations. We've got a lore video coming. Cannot wait, which is all about drone fast and some sort of cake. Mail on a Sunday.
News and notes.
Schedule for this week.
Hot cocoa. All these people.
Supports the show. Adventuring party.
You ready? Let's go.
Let me take a deep breath.
Hail Adventure, and welcome to episode 147 of the Pantheon Plus Rewind, our podcast that delivers to you the most pertinent and poignant of updates for Pantheon Rise of the Fallen and the community surrounding it. This episode, we're going over the recent developer live stream, which focused on some facts and a rogue update. We're doing some exciting Discord news, the pre-alpha recap, Benonai's stuff, as I'm going to start calling the community spotlight, and naturally finishing it all up with part 2 of the recent official lore release. Pack up your hiking gear and allergy medication. We're going outdoors to touch some grass or something with me, Desiree, and my trailblazing co-host Therek in this episode of The Rewind. Yeah. I got it's hitting me hard, Therek.
Is it?
Yeah.
You're getting hit hard by the pollen and the birds and bees and trees having sex around you.
Over the last few weeks, since we have a bit of an issue in our backyard, which is that it's completely overgrown, and I've been kind of chipping away at it with a weed eater, and usually for like a day after I go at it, I'm like just dead. But finally, I think it's just infiltrated my system and actually made me sick. So
permanently allergized.
Yeah. So I'm sure others can sympathize, but I'm going to be really, really fast on my mute button here this week, hopefully.
Yeah, it's been a little bad here too. We've got a lot of forest fires around us, so there's a lot of smoke in the air, and the haze and all that kind of stuff is kind of creeping in. But I mean, mine, I have to knock on wood because mine haven't been that bad yet this year, and it's been a bit of a blessing. I'm sure I'll start suffering as soon as I say that, but so far so good. Yeah. I gotta give you credit on that intro, the pertinent and poignant updates. You're giving that pop filter a workout today. I was impressed with your enunciation there.
Yeah, we'll see how well I did. There's some technique to making. I mean, I got a pop filter on my mic, but you still can't do plosives, directly into the mic. Anyway, little recording thing. It takes some practice.
Well, I know you're recording with your new setup too, so lots of variables in play this week.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy. I've got a new system now, minus video card, but I'm hoping that this propels me into the next 7 years like my last system lasted. So really excited.
You gotta get that value. Got to get that value these days.
Really?
I'm the same way, man. I'm like slow to upgrade. I do a big upgrade and then I just coast for close to a decade on it.
Well, you know who else is a big upgrade for me?
Who's that?
Our wonderful adventuring party.
I should have known. Absolutely.
We've got Daimlos on the Darkmer Bard, Breakout on the Archai Shaman, Grogu on the Human Warrior, Anton on the Darkmer Shaman Glyph Keeper, Ziplocks on the Darkmer Rogue, Sparrow on the Elf Ranger, Bounty Code on the Human Wizard, Screech on the Scar Bard, Wikiwoo on the Human Enchanter, Shuriken on the Dwarf Cleric, Horsosaurus on the Human Warrior, Fury Wrath on the Archai Summoner, Churro on the Halfling Direlord, Galerain Moonsong on the Elf Ranger, Annoying Llama on the Human Monk, and Stands in the Fire on the Darkmer Cleric. There we go. Once again, thank you everybody that supports the show one way or another. We still have the kind of halvesies Patreon going on if you want to support the show that way. Also, of course, there's YouTube's various ways. We've got the super chat if you join us during the premiere, or the super thanks if you leave a comment after the show is over. And of course, we're still on all the podcast platforms and appreciate reviews and everything. So you guys are great.
Absolutely. Yeah, you might notice the Patreon page looks a little different. Patreon's doing some changes to their front end, so there's going to be some upgrades to the images and sort of just the look of it. Nothing changed, just a bit of a cosmetic makeover if you happen to check out the Patreon page. But yeah, thank you everybody for your support. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, we could all use a little bit of a cosmetic makeover every once in a while.
I can use more than that, but yes, absolutely.
For sure. Let's get into the show.
This week in Visionary Realms News and Notes. All right, so let's start with the most recent news that is recapping the developer live stream from Thursday, June 15th on VR's Twitch channel. This was focused on the class refresh for the Rogue, as well as their patented 10 burning questions that they got into. And so they started with those. So we'll just kind of go through the bullet points of what they talked about. I think there was a couple of interesting points, nothing too earth-shattering here, but the one that I know you and I, Desrin, found probably the most interesting of these was when they talked about changing the roadmap to alpha. Because, that's a centerpiece, and that's something that we recap every month when they do the newsletter. We go through it and talk about what's updated. And we sometimes have a hard time, siphoning out what has been updated, what is just a sort of rewording of something, and what's more substantial. So I think that this was exciting to see because it's becoming more and more, they called it bloated and confusing, and I think that's probably accurate. So there's some changes coming to it. They didn't go into the details of what those changes might look like. We had some funny discussions on Pantheon Plus U afterwards where we sort of came up with some ideas for making it like an XP bar, right? Like make the roadmap to alpha.
Yeah.
Let's level up, right? And make it like a bar with mini bubbles and mini dings and all that kind of stuff. I think that's just a fun idea. Yeah. So we kind of joked around about that on P+U afterwards. Savanya thought, I think that was actually her idea, and that we kind of clinged on to it as soon as we heard it. But so it'll be interesting to see, if that's implemented for the newsletter at the end of this month. I'm really hopeful it is, and I would like to see that. In terms of what, I want to put the question out to you, Desrin, and to the community as well. What would you like to see if they're going to change up the roadmap in terms of how it's presented? What changes would you like to see? Ooh. I mean, for me, the way it's organized now is by, the area that's being updated. So you've got characters and models, you've got art and animation, you've got world building. What I might consider doing is reorganizing it so it's sort of like the things that are completed, and then the next layer of closest to completed are like, it sort of goes sequentially: completed, closest, and then as you get to the bottom, those are the things that are furthest away, just as a term in terms of ordering it. So you're reading it on the website, on the page, you're scrolling down, you sort of see the things that are completed first. And I think that, that's what people want to know. They want to know what's been done first and foremost. So it just makes it a little bit more digestible that way. That was sort of what I was thinking. What about you, Des? Did you have any ideas about the roadmap and what you'd like to see? Well,
how about this? I'm gonna go two different ways here. I'm gonna go the super unrealistic way.
I like that way sometimes.
I don't necessarily expect them to do, but and then I'll try to do a more realistic version. But there are just some really good examples out there. So I think the biggest thing is that I would like them to, first of all, categorize and itemize each feature and like technical milestone, and give like a estimated completion percentage for each, and update that monthly, and maybe if something is needs some explanation, give some sort of blurb with the newsletter or the roadmap update, just kind of like the producer's letter does now. It's kind of recap, but it sometimes points certain things out or explains some goals, or if they ran into some issue, just to explain the percentages a little bit if needed.
Right.
And I know on the Plus U, I called out another small game studio working on a unique MMORPG And that's War of Ragnaroks. A few people in our community probably heard about it, especially if you watched episode 100, last year.
We interviewed, when we interviewed Josh Kaba, their director.
Yeah. Well, so they've had a roadmap for, at least a year since we did that. They call it a gameplay progress overview. But yeah, it's just a page that lives on the website, and it's updated every so often. And it's got this thing kind of like the XP bar, I guess, but it's overall progress, and it's just a percentage with the bar. But the other thing is they have like sections underneath. They separate it out into core systems, world building, combat, networking, AI, crafting, questing, the big stuff. And under each of those, there's these individual items with an estimated percent next to them. So like under the world building header, you can see there's an item like initial gray boxing, layout, and planning. And that's at like 100%, right? But if you look at, alongside that, there's audio placement, like, placing audio bits in the world. And that's at 10%. Or like world optimization is at 0%, right? So it gives you an idea of like where they're at. Which you get from that picture is they've got it all like pretty much boxed out, planned out. They're working on the details, but you get to see that, tick up as time goes on. Like, it's audio's at 20% now or 30%. And it doesn't have to be exact, right? It's just to know that there's progress being made. And that also kind of lets them be less specific about like what the updates are. So they don't have to use like confusing techno babble, right? Which I think is important for communication's sake. Like some people like the techno babble. I'm one of those people, but I totally get that it's not everyone's cup of tea, and it's just unhelpful for most people probably, right?
Okay, I officially want to change my answer to your answer because I'm looking at the website for War of Ragnaroks right now. It's amazing. I mean, it's exactly what I'm talking about. This is a really good example of what a good
straightforward
roadmap.
Man. You can immediately see like where the game's at.
So if you're listening to this and you haven't heard of War of Ragnaroks, just go to warofdragnaroks.com. It's Dragnaroks is spelled a little funny. It's DRAGNOROX. It's a game. It's an MMORPG that's in development, and like I said, Des said, we interviewed the director of this game, creative director, and they just released a June update. So like this is a really good example of what I think a good roadmap looks like. So maybe VR takes some inspiration from this. I would have no problem with that. And follows this lead a little bit. I like what you said about the techno stuff too, and I know that resonates with some people. But when I read it, when we've covered it on the show, and I read it, I always feel like I get a little lost in the weeds, and I really don't sort of like, I'm not sure exactly what that means, So we end up speculating about maybe what it means, because you're more versatile or more well versed in that language than I am. But even sometimes you're like, I don't know, I just don't know. I'm not sure. It's sort of like a mix between this and that. It's something I don't know exactly what that means. So yeah, really good answer there, Des.
Thanks.
Appreciate that.
I figured throwing an example out there. It's been, if VR happens to be listening and if they haven't seen it, just for inspiration. I mean, I think that covers like all the bases. I've never seen someone complain about their roadmap or anything, because it tells you it's just straightforward. And it's always on the website. It's not in individual like newsletters, which I think is probably an important thing. Newsletter could, like I said, give a little blurb about what's going on, but otherwise, we already have tools that track what has changed, right? The community can deal with that. Like I wouldn't say that about every single communication thing, but like in this case, the community can be like, oh, this went from 10% to 20%.
Yeah.
It'd be fun,
exactly.
actually.
It would be kind of easy to easy to make, to talk about, easier to talk about, more content to sort of, provide more commentary on. So if you're listening to this, maybe you know a good example of a game that's been in development that had a roadmap of some sort. Maybe you have an idea of what you'd like to see. Like share some examples of other ones that you've seen that you think do a good job of, all the things they're trying to accomplish with it. I mean, make one request, it's like, can we lock the things in that are in there now and not add anything else? Can we make it like an Adobe document that is uneditable? Like can we just sort of like only delete things, don't add things, slight request, but that's more about, overall philosophy than. But yeah,
like there are plenty of examples, both good and bad, of like roadmaps out there. So if you've got one that you thought was really successful, maybe just like, throw it in the comments, just in case VR's checking it out. Cause it wouldn't hurt to have a little bit more inspiration.
For sure.
I would say, so my realistic though, because that's like a whole revamp.
I was content with your pie in the sky example. I guess I'll allow, let's hear your realistic one. It's going to be not as fun.
First of all, like obviously they're going to be doing some reorganization, right? Like, so I kind of am expecting that. I am kind of hoping that they have maybe a more complete list of milestones. And so like when I say milestone though, this is the big conversion that I would like to see that I think would be helpful without a complete like revamp, right? And that's just putting in actual tangible milestones. Like not dates or anything, but like a timeline style, like, we are here. And like you said, put the stuff that's been done before the we are here.
Yeah.
So that people can see, because right now, even the stuff that's marked complete on the roadmap, that's not a good representation of like the actual game. Like there's more that's been completed in the, like for the actual game. So it's like, they would serve, I think, to have something that looks like a timeline, even if it doesn't have dates, to show what's behind, what's ahead, and what's, in the current we are here. And
there you go. You say we are here, and then you know what it brings up? It's like those mall maps, right?
That's exactly what I'm thinking of, yeah.
And you look at, where am I going? Okay, you are here. Okay, like let's get a GPS marker to show us where we're at in the bigger picture. I think that's a great idea. Love to see that. And
I understand it's not linear, right? So, but it's more just about state of things that I think most people are concerned about, right? It's what's the state of things. And so if you put it in one of those three categories, especially if it's visual, so like I said, you can see what's behind, you can see what's, here and what is ahead. And, little maybe blips for like milestones, like, alpha, obviously, or maybe like individual little milestones in between that, like, release certain amount of zones or whatever, things that people can celebrate, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that can do a lot of work for them, in terms of community relations and just perception by the community. If they can, it's an opportunity to, maybe improve that if they feel like that needs to be done, but inspire some confidence in the game and the development process. So it's an opportunity. So that was the bullet point.
I did want to point out one last thing on the topic of roadmaps though, because when we're thinking about like design and stuff, all of that doesn't matter if it's not updated. And so that's going to be my hard like boot on the ground. It's like, none of this matters if this is just like a one-off thing and then it just kind of gets haphazardly updated in the future. Really glad to see it's getting redone, but if a few months down the line it just starts falling apart like the current one, it's just a waste of time. So the bigger deal, however the roadmap revamp ends up, is that it's updated. So
sure. Yeah, exactly. Just make it easy for themselves. Make it easy to update. Lay it out so that it's easily updated and it's not onerous on VR's staff to do that, because that'll just create, a real unwillingness and a real just distaste for doing it.
Don't want it to be tedious for them, and take a bunch of time.
Right.
But like it's a major communique. Like it is a big lane for communication of how the project is doing. So it's like worth putting a little bit of time into.
Like, I can't tell you how many times I've responded to comments on our content where it's like, questioning where they're at and what they're doing. And I always refer them to the roadmap. I say, go to the website, check out the latest producer's letter or, community, whatever, and look at the roadmap. And, it's a big selling point. So I'm glad they led with it. I think it is probably one of the burning questions that the community had. And I'm glad to see them take that on. Now, the next one, not really something that
maybe for some people.
I don't know if maybe it was burning for some people. It wasn't burning in my mind, but they talked about AI and how much influence, because it's pretty popular right now. It's a big discussion. AI generated art, AI generated writing and story and lore and all that stuff. How much of that are they considering using? And I was glad to hear them say that's not something they're considering at this time. They're not really looking at that. They want to maintain a real human touch to the content they're producing, whether on the art side or on the story side. And, it's not something that they're committing to right now or doing anything with right now. It's not to say it couldn't happen in the future. They kind of, covered the bases there and because the technology is advancing, but right now it's not something that's on their mind.
It was a really even, fair answer, I think. And I don't want to get super into it because there's really impassioned people, on both sides
totally
of it,
is.
I think even just a little bit of pushback in the chat during the stream, and a few people got obviously somewhat offended that people weren't either for it or weren't against it. And so just saying that they looked into it, they're keeping an eye on it, but it's not in the cards right now. And they did kind of say a little bit that some of the ideas behind it go against their design philosophy a little bit, right? But not to say they didn't just completely shut it down, which I'm sure we'd see a bunch of comments of people be like, you're stupid for not utilizing the tools available and
embrace technology, embrace it. I know. And that's a fair point. I'm not nobody's here is anti-technology, obviously. We like tech and tools and fun stuff. And I said this on P+U, but VR has very much always been about having great tools to do more with less, and then clearly this fits the bill. And I think that's why maybe there's this desire to see VR look into this and use this, because they feel like it's an avenue that actually makes what they want to accomplish possible. And I can understand that perspective. Makes sense. But the comment that you're referring to, and I think the back and forth was that it's just not there yet. It's just the technology is advancing over time, and it might get to the point where it's can produce the kind of quality content that might be usable. But I think right now it's still in its infancy. Yeah. It's still developing.
Well, and I did like the answer from Tara, because Tara's a young artist, and I think if anyone's gonna be keeping an eye on this, it's probably that group of folks. And I like how she kind of made a note about the quick visualization, though, because the folks that I know, even folks that are against art AI as a final product, have noted that it can be good for folks, especially non-artists, to kind of quickly get an idea into the visual space, and then a professional artist to take that and further interpret it into something handcrafted, which sounds like, if anything, a direction that they might consider, which is great for designers that aren't artists or don't have the time to put that kind of stuff together. Be like, I want something, kind of like this, but, if you could, make it make it like ours, right? That totally makes sense. And it was nice that, I feel like they recognize things without going overboard or underboard.
Yeah. It's an interesting discussion. We could talk about AI all day in terms of its, and stuff like that. And I think it's a tool. I think it's an interesting tool, and it certainly has its uses.
Nathan's comments, though, if you haven't,
What were Nathan's comments? I can't remember. What did he say?
If anyone watches the plus you, you'll see there was some,
the cringe pony
there
thing.
was some jokes about him trying to use it for cringe pony, and it's so just some nightmare material that's
Right.
Yeah.
He did talk about the nightmare material it created. That's funny. I actually wish I could see that.
I kind of do too. It was cracking me up, man.
Yeah. The next question was, will your character have a surname in Pantheon? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
And big news there.
Yeah, I was about to say, we've pretty much this has been known for a long time, but maybe
It's
some
fun
folks didn't know.
Yeah, and it's fun to speculate on what your surname or my surname, or I think in Minus's case when they were talking about it, somebody said he couldn't come up with a surname for himself. He said Minus Paradox, and we all sort of threw some out in the chat there to, so we'll see what comes of that. On the next front, though, they did confirm what we talked about last week, that Bronson, aka Chris Willis, was hired as their newest artist, and celebrated that a little bit. So excellent to get a little public attention on our friend Bronson there, and his hard work is surely going to be something they'll feature at some point, I would imagine.
I really hope so. First of all, his stuff is really cool. I wish we could still have it on the show. But,
yeah, me too.
But the other thing that I keep coming back to is leadership. He has so much experience, right? My hope is that he can come in and really refine their pipeline to as a character artist, at least, to really get stuff flowing in that department. I can't wait to see what he brings to the table, man. Really excited about that one.
Yeah, I've been doing some of those concept art lore reads for the channel here lately, and if he was to make one of those, God, I would love to just narrate the little notes, the little art notes on the side, and sort of go through it. It'd be so fun to do.
Heck yeah.
So yeah, can't wait to see what Bronson turns out there. They confirmed that active racial abilities are not currently in production. There's nothing is being done. They have slated designs, is the way that they described it. So not ready to announce anything with regard to active racial abilities on your characters. One of the questions.
Oh, sorry, I want to touch on that because there was a little nugget in there, I think, and that was just it. They want to get the full 1 to 50 in for all the classes before they tackle racials. Which I think probably speaks to this kind of reoccurring theme of we want to get this portion of the game, fun and somewhat balanced. Then we can look at this extra thing or this next thing. And because, you could imagine, especially because this was specifically about activated racials, right? Mm-hmm. How that works into, LAS or doesn't, who knows? But that is one thing that could really throw off the balance of certain things. And not that everything needs to be balanced, to be clear. But I thought it was, mildly interesting that they kind of officially said that we're going to do the 1 to 50 for all the classes first.
Yeah, it's good that you caught that. I didn't catch that, but so we sort of have an idea of when we might hear something, and if it's 1 to 50 for all the classes, that'll be a while before we hear anything. And you mentioned the balance. It's interesting because you look at the racial passive abilities, which are on the website under the races, and you can see that some of them are pretty powerful, right? Just the passives, not to mention an active ability that you can actually choose when to use. Right. Like the run speed buff for the Scar and some of the innate resistances with regard to some of the other races already playing into it. And then, so it makes sense. They want to get everything sort of settled out before they start implementing any of those or committing to any of them at all. So,
yeah.
The next point was kind of cool. And this is talking about having their devs stream their work live. What are the chances of that happening? Who would we like to see and that kind of thing. That was the question. And Minus talked about how there's a lot of interest in that. There's, just sort of randomly, I think, informally polling the staff that he's had, conversations with. It seems like there would be quite a bit of willingness to do that. They mentioned, you mentioned Tara Solbrig, aka Kamara, who does have a Twitch channel and does stream their work, and I checked it out during the stream, and it's really cool. I think that the thing, people like seeing stuff like that, and I think that would probably go over really, really well. So especially, it makes me think of Jared Poulin, right? And we've seen his artwork and how he narrates it and how he sort of talks about it when he does those creature reveals and the monster jam and all that stuff.
Yeah, Jared Poulin stream would be like, it's literal modern day Bob Ross. That's what I imagine.
That's exactly right. 100% Bob Ross. And I'm a big Bob Ross fan.
Oh yeah. Grew up with that. Like, man.
Yeah, man. 100%. I grew up with it too. And I've actually been watching it more recently. It helps me go to sleep sometimes.
Oh man. I've watched other game dev streams in the past, some art and some like other stuff, like Jason Wyman, who used to work on the project. Actually, he does some really great like Unity just live stuff, and it's usually a good time. But one thing I did kind of want to like comment on is, while it would be really cool to have like a Bob Ross, Jared Poulin stream every once in a while, I really don't like. This should be 100% like opt-in free time kind of a thing, in my opinion. Like we don't need people on the team going through having to learn how to stream.
Yeah, no, for sure. And Minus brought that up. He mentioned that. He's like, there are some barriers to doing this.
Streaming's not particularly easy. I mean, good thing we have a professional.
Oh, Drac is our lifeline. But you're right. I mean, it's not easy to do, and if it causes any disruption in the workflow, that's the last thing you want, right?
Yeah.
It's game development first, it's content production second, and if it was to be in any way sort of an impediment to them doing their work, I would not be in favor of that. But just if it's, sometimes I think for some people too, it might actually have the opposite effect. It might be more of like a motivator, because some people love to just narrate their work as they go. They like to have an audience. They like people, commenting on what they're doing. And I think it could actually inspire maybe people to, to do their work. And if you're getting tired or you're getting just a little, burned out on what you're doing, this might be have an invigorating effect on that, the dev. I'm just sort of spitballing here, of course.
Again, if they're the kind of person that's into that, like Tara, right? Like that totally makes sense. I mean, reminds me of Grimcore, watching Grimcore from Valheim dev team.
Oh, I never watched that.
He's got great art streams as well. A lot of times not even having to do with Valheim, but sometimes it does. But a lot of people really enjoy watching him just because I think he enjoys it, and that's kind of the most important thing to me. It's like, only if like they're enjoying it and wanting to do that, because especially representing a game in development, like game devs, they receive a lot of negativity, and it can get really wearing, and so it takes a certain kind of person to put yourself out there. And we'll see how that plays out, though. If it does end up working out, I will totally have them on my second screen all the time whenever they're up.
Yeah, no, it'd be really cool. Just like a peek behind the curtain, right? To see how VR operates, and to sort of like, how you see sometimes those game development studios do like after the game is released, they do like the behind the scenes during development tour of the studio. Like I've always wanted to see something. I know VR doesn't like have a physical brick and mortar type studio going on, I don't think, but
not anymore.
It's very virtual. Yeah, it's very virtual. So I don't know, but even just something like that, I've always sort of wanted a bit of a tour of the VR, virtual office, if you will. I don't know. Maybe that's just a pipe dream, but anyway, it's a fun thing, and I'm glad that this was an interesting question, so I'm glad that they talked about that. So onto the meat and potatoes of this thing was the rogue update, and honestly, I probably have less to say about this than I do about the other
Right?
burning
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, they did another one of these back in September of 2022, and you did a video for us, sort of covering this, right? I was actually watching your video while this was going on, while the dev stream was happening, so I could compare. Like, let's look at the skills then, and let's look at them now, and it's pretty close. There's a lot of similarities. Of course, they look a little bit different because those ones had, I think, more of Tehom's touch on them, and it seems like they've moved away from some of the things that were involved there. But yeah, it was okay. It was kind of neat to see the rogue in action. The main takeaway for me, at least, was that they're being more reasonable with the support mechanic. So the crowd control abilities of the rogue are getting maybe a little toned down, to try and balance it out, but also keeping that tactical sense and cost benefit analysis of every decision you make to try and make those as meaningful as possible. It's the same sort of thing we've heard on the Dire Lord, we heard on the other class refresh streams. That's the through point, that's the through line through all of them, is that decisional matrix. But what did you think of the rogue update? Anything in there you wanted to touch on?
I mean, it's another 1 to 10 thing, and it seems like we're going to get 1 to 10 for all the classes, which I think for the sake of these videos ending up on the class page of the website, I think it's super good. Like, I just, the 1 to 10, it kind of, like, I feel like that's not... It just isn't as like inspiring or exciting, right? But like the videos themselves, like that whole section is done super well. And so for the sake of consistency, I guess I could see them, finishing this series or whatever, and getting all of that onto the class pages. But then at the same time, I'm like, but that footage is going to look so outdated, by the time they finish the series. True. And so I have this back and forth of like, it's cool, but also like, I don't know. It's
bit of a love-hate relationship with it.
I love the rogue though. Like the rogue is pretty high on my tier of like interesting classes. I spoke again on the Plus U about like how I love the kind of cost benefit analysis that you're always having to do. Potentially like really, really cool class. Again, I would love to see maybe later on a few, speckle in some higher level things to get people excited about like where the class goes. They mentioned like Waylay and Backstab, how they start out as basically the same ability, but they start to diverge later on in the rogue's journey. And I'm like, man, that would have been a cool thing.
Right. Yeah. Let's go down that road a little further and see what that's about, because you're right. I mean, and again, we've seen the 1 to 10 on all these classes so far, the ones they've done so far, before. And I think for me, what I end up sort of feeling is like, I would love to see this just on a class I haven't seen before. Like I'm really interested in these skills, but I feel like I've seen these classes before. And I know it's that's part of, the issue when you follow the game closely like we do, and it's for new people. This is really, really interesting, and I get that, because I would be interested if this was a class we'd never seen before. I would be like laser focused in on this, watching it, and Nathan got so excited on Plus U when they mentioned the Paladin, when they're going to be talking tanks on Parting the Veil next week, which you're going to cover on Plus U too. And Nathan just got the little taste of the Paladin mentioned, and he's very excited. And that's what I'm saying. He's thirsty. Like, it's like a starving man in the desert, like if they said that about any class we haven't seen before, and they were going to do one of these videos on a class we haven't seen before, like that's what I'm waiting for. I'm just dying for that.
Well, I mean, the optimist could say we're getting one of these every month, and we only have so many more classes that are in the game to go. So, I mean,
that's a very optimistic way of looking at it.
Hey, I try, right?
Yeah. Desert's not always the downer. Sometimes he's the optimist.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see how it goes. I am really glad though that like when I point someone to the website, because Savania's also updating the class page, as well with like the new data. And so it's like, I feel more confident sending someone to the website because of these updates. And I know we've stressed up website updates for a long time. And even though this is kind of a small thing, it is nice to know that like, oh, I send someone they're interested in a rogue like to the rogue page, and like they actually have some like actionable information, you know?
Right. Yeah, having a video on the class page will be really, really neat if that's what it ends up being. I know that sounds like the intent, and I mean that's a great design idea. I think that's really, really useful. So yeah, look for the class page to be updated next week. That's what Savanya said, and we'll see maybe what it looks like. So that was cool. Anything else about the rogue stuff, Des, before we move on?
Nah.
No. Okay. When we were looking at the website, I actually noticed as well that Tim Wathen, aka Convo, is now back on the website as listed as part of the team page as a game designer. So so Convo was moved on for a little while, and now he's back. So again, VR is adding more staff. We've seen a influx of artists. We've seen new people coming along. Savanya just recently as well as the community manager, which has been just a wonderful addition. She does such a great job. And Convo joining as a game designer back to the team. So that's a good sign for VR.
This is a nice surprise. And I think there's something kind of nostalgic about having some of the like old team members come back to the project. I don't know why, but there's something I was like, Convo, like, awesome. Awesome.
Yeah. Well, I think it speaks to, I mean, to me, what it says to me is that like when people leave, we always have this negative assumption when somebody leaves the team, like, that something bad happened. There was some sort of, something in crisis. And it's like, sometimes people just need to take time off. Sometimes people have other projects to go to and then they come back. Like this is a small community of developers, really. I mean, game developers. From what I've learned, it's a very small community, and people float around from different jobs and do different teams, and then they come back and you meet somebody you worked with 20 years ago and that kind of thing, right?
Oh yeah, and then there's like career progression as well. Like people have lives, they're just people. I want to throw you a little bit of a loop here because this is kind of, I'm not even sure. I'd have to like check Wayback Machine or something. But did you notice like they've reorganized the team page a little bit too?
Yeah.
And production management, Robert Crane is a project manager.
So yeah, that sounds interesting. I didn't notice that. I'm gonna have to go to the team page now.
Yeah, it took me like several times before I was like, okay, first of all, this is in a different order than it was before, and I was like, wait, Robert Crane, like the programmer, the shy Aussie programmer?
Programming. Yeah, he was in technology and programming, right?
I mean, he still is. He's still a senior programmer, but having a production management, I know I'm probably not going to resonate with like a lot of people here, but I think VR is getting to the size where they really do need some serious like organization and project management, and a whole like production pipeline, like milestones, goals, and I don't know how they work on the inside or anything, but it was nice to see, even if it's a current member of the team kind of doing two things, that they're, assuming this is a new thing, that they are taking it seriously, that they need someone to organize this stuff. So I'm all about it.
That's very reassuring, actually. I'm looking at this now, and you're right. I mean, having somebody in charge of production management might seem like a managerial sort of, meaningless job for some people, but I'm telling you, like, this, I think it's needed.
Yeah,
I think it's needed.
agreed.
I think this VR might benefit from something like this. So good for Robert. If that's, I mean, it sounds like maybe a promotion of some sort, or maybe additional responsibilities. I don't know.
Well,
probably
the
both.
other thing is just like being that it's someone, I mean, who knows the project better than Robert? Like he's been there forever. So
the very beginning.
Yeah. I want to see what happens with this, and I hope they talk about it, honestly. Like, I kind of miss having the dev roundtables, with just like,
they used to go over this stuff.
Yeah. Like it would be really cool. I know Robert is not particularly, he's a bit camera shy, right? But it would be cool to just know what's going on there. Like, what's this position doing and how's it going to impact the project? I'd love to see it, man.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said earlier, pulling back the curtain and not like into their personal lives. That's not what we're interested in, right? Like we've talked about this before, like that was one of the things with the roundtable. It's like, we don't want to, we're not into the rockstar treatment so much. We're into like, what does VR structure look like? Tell us about the team. Tell us about how it's managed and organized, because that's interesting to us, at least at this point, and at least for me. So that's the dev stream from this week. Just overall thoughts from me on this, Des. I mean, sort of a light one, if you might say, bit light on the actual development. I would say
I had like the same note. My note here is that it wasn't a very updatey update.
Not a very updatey update. Yes, exactly. I like that. That's a nice way of saying it. And it's not a bad thing. It just is what it is. We're going into the summer months here, and I'm sure there's people taking some time off, perhaps. I don't know. I'm speculating, but they're not going to all be these big updates. So this one was a little light, but that's okay.
It was like, it wasn't, I wouldn't say it was bad. It definitely, but it also, like, this is one of the updates that I'm like, it's not going to go down in history.
Right, exactly.
It's like, we got a few little tiny things, but nothing really super substantial that we're going to be talking about for a long time, I don't think.
Right.
But it wasn't terrible. The road video is great. Adds to the collection of videos and.
Yep. So let's work back in time now, because we have 3 weeks of content to cover that we haven't had a show for 3 weeks, so we got to work back a little ways. They tweeted on June 1st, and they've since occurred that they're the official Discord, which used to be restricted to people who have pledged at certain tier levels. It's been opened. It's now open for everybody can join the official Discord. So I'll just sort of read you the blurb that came along with this on June 1st. It says, Pantheon Rise of the Fallen is now opening the gates to the public on our official Discord server. We welcome everyone to come and join our community, get to know our members, and interact with our development team. As a community-driven game, it's our hope that we may be able to foster a gaming community that will build ties that not only enhance future in-game experiences, but also carry over into our everyday lives. So you can join the official Discord now, just like you would any other Discord server. If you go there and you look around, I'm curious as to what you have to say about this, Des, because it's a little convoluted. It's a little there's a lot of channels, we'll say.
Depending on your access level.
Yes. You can't see everything if you're just joining and you haven't pledged. There are still channels that are only visible at certain pledge levels, and so, but the main conversation that, talking about Pantheon, talking about, gaming in general, and some of the more, off-topic stuff is available for everybody.
Yep. And it's utilized too. It's nice seeing
it is utilized
conversation there. I'm pretty, I wouldn't say amazed, but having that open up and just see the consistent, the first few days was a lot of spam in the the salutations channel, right? It just, and then they have done some channel condensing. I think Savanya and Kilson are kind of working together to try to clean it up a little bit. But I've been in worse. and it is really cool to see just how many people are wanting to pop in there that haven't, done so already, which, there's a lot of people that are just interested but haven't pledged yet. So that was kind of an encouraging thing, I think, is just kind of look in there and just see all those names. Yeah.
I think it's a good opportunity for people to see what we're always talking about how VR is very much you just get to know them being in that server because they talk a lot.
You look on the side, boom.
We were talking, look on the side, look at all the names, and you get to sort of see who's who, and you get to realize that Kyle Olson is the rebel who has never changed his icon, his avatar to the VR avatar.
And if you look at his Spotify, it's this is my favorite pastime, is to just be like, what's Kyle listening to? And it's it's as eclectic as what I listen to. And I really appreciate that about Kyle. And I imagine, do you remember a long time ago, they had a developer roundtable with Kyle on there, and someone asked about like his process, and he talked about like sometimes to just think through a thing, he just has to like lay on the couch and like listen to some music. And so whenever I see some like really like introspective or something, like some song on his Spotify, I just imagine Kyle just like in the zone. Like
it's funny you should mention that. I do remember that very clearly too, and I have an image of him sitting in the dark. I think he said he like sits in the dark. Yeah, is the way he phrased it, and I'm like, totally see that, right? This is like programming wizardry of some sort. This is how he does what he does. So yeah, anyway, the point being that the Discord's a fun place. There's lots of conversation going on. The pink names talk a lot. So if you want to get to know the devs, it's a good place to go and check it out. And I encourage everybody to pop in over there and, see what's going on. So, and then going back, there was another May 27th, they tweeted out some concept art of some toxic slimes. And I thought this was kind of interesting because they had like 3 different versions of the slime: tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. And I don't know what the deal with the tiers is. We've never heard them talk about creatures being like tier 1,
it
tier 2,
cracks me up how
3.
much people have like gotten hung up on this one this one tweet. And I know this is kind of old news now, but this was so funny to me because people's interpretation are like the things that they picked out are like just across the board. Like you pick out the tier thing, right? Someone else thought what was it? It was like, it looked like one of those mobile game ads where you see like level 1 adventure,
I'm not gonna lie.
level 50 adventure. I mean, it's not like that or anything, but I think that the tiering was like kind of interesting, but it's probably just like internal designation. The positive side of that, I think, would be, how, I mean, in every MMO, we've played MMOs, we know how it works. You have the slime at level 1, and then you have a bigger slime at level 20, and you have a bigger slime at level 40, and like it's just a scaled up model, or maybe it's a different color, right? And to me, what this says is that at least internally, they're wanting to have similar models that aren't exactly the same, maybe, as you scale up, so that it's like they can reuse some things, but it's not literally just a, scale up the model.
Yeah, maybe.
That's kind of what I got out of it, at least.
Yeah, maybe. It's an interesting piece. I mean, I wish there was some notes or something. It sort of like stands out from the other artwork that we've seen because it doesn't have any sort of like lore notes or any sort of information about it. It's just slimes. And
it looks different too, right?
I wondered if it was one of their new artists. Did you
I have no
recognize
idea.
the art style at all? No,
I did. I will say I kind of had trouble like imagining this in 3D space in something that like matches Pantheon's aesthetic.
Yeah. So totally. It was like it was a little jarring. It felt a little bit like different from everything else we've seen. But
we'll see how it ends up in game. Because like that,
I'm not opposed to slimes. I like.
Oh
slimes.
yeah, slimes are a key part of any RPG experience.
I'm a big Dragon Warrior fan from back in the day, and slimes, right?
Did I ever tell you about the time I found Dragon Warrior monsters for the Game Boy in a parking lot, just like chilling there? Like I think I was coming back from like the dentist or something, and
it was just on the ground.
Yeah, just chilling there, and I was like, "Oh, what's this?" I popped it in. I probably played that for hundreds of hours as a kid. 'Cause it was literally like Dragon Warrior Pokemon, and it was so good.
Oh,
it was so good.
Yeah, those games are awesome, and the slimes are just such an iconic part of the Dragon Warrior, Dragon Quest games. Metal slime, all that stuff. It's just amazing. So, I mean, I'm not opposed to slimes. I just thought this was a bit of a weird one-off.
It was a little random.
But yeah, it's okay.
Maybe we'll get something else random that isn't as jarring. I don't know.
Maybe. Okay, so moving on, then we're at the pre-alpha recap. So they gave us a recap of the last pre-alpha test that happened on June 10th and 11th. And I thought the tone of this was pretty on point, pretty accurate. They talked about it being a bit of a chill, sort of low-key pre-alpha test because there wasn't really anything new going on. So I picked out a couple points that I thought were interesting for us to maybe touch on here. The first one was the crafting and gathering piece. They said crafting and gathering continue to be a major facet of our current line of testing. David Nefel Beach has been working hard on adding a crafting system that is rewarding and interesting. The end goal is to have a viable method of gameplay that produces usable items that compete with world drops. So that last piece is where I think, I've seen some discussion about, because that's a topic, that's always been a topic, how do your crafted items compete with, loot drops. And I think it's very important that they do that. I've always been a proponent of having a system that can match and keep pace with something that drops from a high level area or a really rare mob. I like crafting, having that level of prestige attached to it. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy agree for me. I've been a pretty big fan of like their stated crafting goals for a while. I love that crafting's being treated with a lot of like weight and importance, because it's all about like interdependence, right? Because it's not just to say that like, well, crafting stuff is easier to make and therefore everyone's just going to use crafting stuff, or adventuring gear is easier to get, so everyone's just going to use adventuring gear and ignore crafting stuff. Like they're really, really going for a nice split where you actually like have incentives to go either way. And that's really exciting. And I love to see it develop,
Yeah. It's really like we've talked about in the last couple shows. I think just seeing Nefel's work come to fruition and knowing the effort he's putting into it to make it an important system, not a throwaway system or an add-on in some way that feels less important.
On that note, actually, I was just thinking, on the note of it is in development, right? Like a lot of stuff is still like coming along, but once like the main stuff is together, I think it would actually be a kind of cool footage thing to have like a time lapse of a like start to finish, like making a sword. Because we can't talk about like the specifics, right? Because it hasn't been shown in a PA stream. We've seen little tidbits like harvesting and really simple like crafting, but I really hope they show how like what it takes to make a piece of gear in like I said, time-lapse fashion, just to be like, well, you can compare this to going out and adventuring and getting lucky or finding a named or whatever, because at the risk of like kind of stepping on the line a little bit, I'd argue it's very similar investment. And I think that's really cool. I'd love to just A/B that kind of time lapse,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of people would be interested in that, in seeing that, I'm sure. And Minus likes to show crafting. He's claimed to fame as one of the first crafter in Pantheon when he made some daggers. So maybe he can up his status a little bit and make some content that shows us where crafting's at. Front to back, sort of first step to last step kind of thing would be pretty cool. Not only a sword, like maybe just make a whole set for a character, like outfit a character, give him all the materials he needs, and outfit an entire suit, with a suit of armor, like some armor, a sword. Shields were in for this last PA test. They talked about that. So you can really sort of completely outfit a character right now with the crafting that's in. So,
and I mean, that seems to be like one of the biggest things like pushing forward right now. And so to me, I'm like, yeah, as soon as that's in like a showable state, like I think that's a definitive progress thing that, even if you're not a crafter, it'd be like, wow, like they're doing a lot there.
Yeah, you're right. It does. It sort of signals a greater level of advancement and development. I agree. The other quote I picked up from this was that they said their primary goal of these monthly tests is server and world stability as well as bug squashing, and we've accomplished a lot in that area thanks to our testers. We look forward to building upon that with dynamic content that will give our players a comprehensive gaming experience in the near future. Now, those two words, dynamic content, sort of got a little bit of traction. I saw in some discussions. I know, and I think there was a little reading into it. I don't really think it means anything. That sounds like that was your take too,
like,
right?
Of course, there's a part of me that hopes there's some significance to this, but the other part of me that's just like, I don't want to just say like the realist, but it's been a buzzword for so long, and I kind of feel like it just gets thrown around nowadays, right? Like it just is it's more of an emphasizing word than it is a definitive word, and so I'm not gonna look into this really.
No, to me it means the dispositions. To me it means the qualities the mobs can spawn with, and we've had this sort of discussion before when this comes up. It's like that's the type of way that they're keeping the content fresh, right? So that's what dynamic.
I think that's
content means
definitively dynamic for sure. For sure.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, that's what I thought. So, just a couple other bullet points, observations from this PA recap. There were no streams. Nobody streamed this test. So that was, we were speculating before on whether they're going to have somebody lined up for every PA test, and apparently not. So
yeah, well, like I said, like I wasn't expecting them to have another lineup like literally the next month, right? And so not having one this month to me is kind of like, oh, like, okay, like I wasn't expecting it to be every single month personally. So
I thought there would be, I don't know, I thought maybe there would be enough people would be interested. Maybe people wanted to enough that they might just give people an opportunity to do it. But on the other hand, maybe that's not the case. I don't know. It's hard to say whether it's just a lack of interest or a lack of, they just couldn't get it set up in time for the stream or for the PA test. Who knows? So we should get the July pre-alpha test announced at the end of the month. If they follow their usual routine with the newsletter, we'll know when that is. So I'm looking forward to the July test for sure to see sort of, if things are different, because like they said, this one was a low key, very few changes. And if that stays, if they continue to do it like that, or if there's more on tap for July, we'll see. Anything else, Des, before we move into the notes for the week rather than the news?
No, I'm good. Let's go.
You're good? Okay. All right. So in terms of Pantheon Plus, what we're up to here for the week of June 19th through to the June 25th, we do have another full week, picking up pace again from our little bit of a desert of content from the last couple weeks.
Drac went on vacation and it all fell apart is really what happened.
It's seriously pretty much what happened. He didn't go on vacation. He was working. I know he was working. And he had a big work thing to deal with. So he's back though. And so we can have fun again now that Drac's back. Thank God. Him and his buddies are doing the P+ After Dark thing on Monday nights, going to hardcore on Embers Adrift, having a great time with that game, really enjoying it. Yeah. I've seen so many people. There's a lot of Redbeard Flynn did a video about that recently.
Dude, did you see Josh Strife Hayes?
I did. I just saw that before we started recording. I saw that.
Like, Red's made it, man. He's made it.
So
really though, like it's exciting times. Like even I'm kind of like, oh, what are you doing over there?
Well, and I think the thing is too, is that for our guild, the Plus Guild, we are going to be trying to encourage people to play Embers Adrift because we feel like there's going to be a little bit of a lull over the summer with regard to Pantheon content, perhaps from VR. So we're trying to sort of keep people busy. We want to really get people playing something. So we are trying to go a little hardcore on Embers Adrift lately. And like you said, Josh Strife Hayes mentioned to Redbeard Flynn on Twitter saying, I should really get into playing Embers. I should find some time to play it. And then, they kind of chimed in. And even Eloa, the dev, one of the community manager for Stormhaven Studios, replied saying, we'd love to have you play the game and that kind of thing. So Embers Adrift is seeing a lot of success, a lot of attention lately, and it's really well-deserved, I think. So if you're not
a long way
familiar with it, yeah, absolutely. Go check it out. We play it. They play midnight Eastern on our Twitch channel, pantheonplus.twitch.tv, and you can check out Drac and the crew playing Embers Adrift. Tuesday night coming up this next week is grading night for Lotro. So this is where we come together. We the 101 and 201 groups come together, give some quick grades. And I say quick,
yeah,
because we're gonna have a timer. Everybody's gonna be bound by a timer.
You're doing the timer thing.
We're doing
You're
the timer
sticking
because we have
to it.
some.
Like,
Well,
well,
that's
it remains
yet to be seen.
Yeah. I mean, this like, is this the longest you guys have gone on?
Yes.
Okay. I was like, it seems it's like the end of a Robert Jordan novel. Like this is epic.
It totally
man.
is. It felt like an epic Robert Jordan novel for all the good and bad that brings along with it. You start out really excited and you're like, cool, this is awesome. And then by,
doors.
then doors, by chapter 182, you're like, all right, let's get this thing finished. Let's put this thing to bed. I'm done with this. So we're all a little bit feeling that right now with Lotro, but we will be fair and grade it appropriately. So that's Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern on our Twitch channel to check that out. And then Thursday, we have Parting the Veil from VR, talking about the tank classes, as we mentioned. And then Desert, you and Man of Rohan. I think Redbeard's off this week.
Yeah.
Is it Redbeard or Menoron? Yeah, okay. So that's, you guys follow the dev stream on Pantheon plus U2 immediately after on our Twitch channel. You'll be hosting that, and I'm sure you're looking forward to that, right?
It'll be interesting. I hope they step up the nuggets, the beans for this one. Like I know I wasn't particularly like super into the healer updates, right? But with tank classes, we've only got 1 out of 3. So like we've got to hear some new stuff or some concrete things, and I'm actually a warrior fan. Like I know a lot of people see it as the basic class, but if going from the past Pantheon stuff, there's a lot of interest there for me, and I hope that they at least reaffirm my interest. If not, maybe give some new nuggets on what they're looking at for the warrior, and I guess the paladin.
Yeah. I'm so going to be interested to see how Nathan reacts to the paladin stuff, because I know for you, like I know that the last time, because druid is your class, right? And that was
my class.
Healers. So I think you were a little bit like more invested in hearing some interesting confirmed things or tangible things. So I'm wondering if Nathan's going to have a little bit of the same effect. But
I didn't even think of this, but I should probably ask Nathan if he wants to do the show in place of Red.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I mean, that would be a party. I know this is so funny.
Totally should do that.
This is off the cuff, guys. Like,
yeah, it's very much planning in progress.
On Sunday when this goes live, let me know. Like, should I reach out to Nathan? Like, do you guys want to see Nathan on the Plus U2 as well?
Anyone who says no doesn't know Nathan, and you don't know what you're saying, because that would be a travesty to not have him there. But I mean, if you can set it up, great. So check that out. We'll update. Join our Discord, follow us on Twitter, that kind of thing, to find out updates on that if we can set that up. But yeah, that would be great. Friday, our friend Redbeard Flynn has a video coming out called Last Hope for MMORPGs. So he's been putting out lots of videos lately. Definitely some interesting conversations he's starting and sort of having. And I really like the conversational and sort of
me too.
video essay format that he's doing. It's really, really good. And then our friend Sparrow streaming. She's moving over to YouTube for her streaming. So if you don't know, Sparrow streams on Twitch, or she has up to this point, but she's moving everything over to YouTube, it sounds like. So that's she's streaming Project 99. That's the EverQuest emulator server, 7 p.m. Eastern on her YouTube channel. So make sure you are subscribed there and have notifications turned on so you don't miss that. Saturday, the EverQuest crew is playing on the Thornblade server. Now, this is Sarah and Essen, our friends. You've seen them on the 101 and 201 shows. So they are playing on the EverQuest TLP server, or Thornblade rather. That's 9 p.m. on Sarah's Twitch channel, and you can find a link to that in the description. And finally, Sunday, quests and coffee. My favorite other Sunday of the week, other than doing this, when we were playing Solasta, Crown of the Magister. That's me, Grogu, Sparrow, and Fate, having an absolute blast with that game. Every episode is more hilarious than the last.
It's so good.
And I'm told that there was actually a big patch for Solasta, and they've updated some of the facial animations and like character model animations. I just heard, Grogu told me that, or he said it in our group chat. So I'm interested to go in and see how things look, because that was, it was sort of the price you always pay for these indie games, is that a little bit of a little bit of a uncanny valley sometimes going on with these character models. They don't always look right. But anyway, that's Sundays noon Eastern when there's no rewind on our YouTube channel. I'll stream it live. Come check it out. Hang out. We'd love to see you there. So yeah, and just other sort of random notes here. You've been paying attention to the channel. I've been putting up some of the lore note narration stuff. I did the Ogrim, the Gas Bat. There's more on the way. I've already got a couple in the works, so you'll be getting those sometime at some point in the future. And yeah, the last thing I want to mention too is that we are currently, Benonai has a project we've referenced a couple times that's in the works that might involve some voice recording on my part. So doing some character voices for an audio production that he's putting in. I wanted to sort of throw it out there that, we talked earlier about devs recording their work. Would you be interested in seeing me like do some live stream, some voice recording stuff, like doing that kind of stuff? I've never really been like into it myself, but I thought if there was a demand for it out there and people wanted to see something like that, I would have no opposition to doing it. And I asked Benonai, somebody else actually asked Benonai if he would be okay with us doing that. And he said, yeah, absolutely, go ahead. So
Stream's just like, it's just the video feed of you underneath a blanket with your microphone.
Yeah, in a closet, completely encapsulated in like a blanket with like a little flashlight on my face, and the mic and my setup. Yeah, no, I don't know. Just a thought I had. So let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in that. But that is the VR news and notes.
The Pantheon community is full of cool projects, new people, and things that are just worth sharing. What's this over here? Look at that. So let's see what we can find in this week's Community Spotlight. Well, once again, Benonai stands nearly alone in the Pantheon creative space as the guy just holding it up on his shoulders. We've got two, I would say, wonderfully talented entries I want to share for this episode. The first one is Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, the story of Terminus. And it's kind of like a short story or plot intro to Pantheon, like generally. A bit of backstory meant to, I guess, the goal seems to be to just quickly just plunge you into the lore, hitting on a ton of stuff really fast. But I think he does a great job of putting a lot into that short video without it getting, too ridiculous. And it's pretty epic too. Like he tried to make it really epic, and I think that comes through.
It was interesting because he, like you say, you can go so long with this stuff because if you actually read the canon text, it's extensive, right? And it's easy to make a 10-minute video, but he actually did a really good job of sort of putting everything into a package that somebody can watch, listen to him say it, and you sort of get the gist of what's going on in the world.
Yeah, really well done, really helpful. I also really liked kind of the adjectives, I guess, that he used for the races kind of near the end. Because it wasn't your stereotypical thing. One of the ones that I really, like, my ears really perked up on was he called halflings vengeful. I really appreciate that he didn't do the tropes, jovial halflings or whatever. Because I think it shows that he's, talking about Pantheon, not just, generic fantasy MMORPG, like kind of thing that everybody's used to.
Yeah, and that's Benonai's signature, right? He's got a unique perspective on some of the classes. Like, if you don't know who Benonai is and you haven't read any of this stuff, he's very committed to the humans as these sort of evil conspiratorial overlords that have fooled everybody into thinking they're these benevolent, we're just humans. We're the good guys. Like, he's very much a conspiracy theorist when it comes to Pantheon's lore. And I love that angle on it, right? That's so fun because it shows creativity and it shows a willingness to interpretation being part of how you take the lore and what it means to you. And that's what really matters, that's what's important. Well, he emphasizes
especially because this particular video was not really from the perspective of the humans, but it was somewhat human focused. And then he kind of breaks it off to be like, and there's basically a version of this applying to a bunch of races. Like, this is just one slice, but I think he does just a great job of kind of getting everybody up to speed really fast, and that's hard to do.
Yeah. So, in his channel is criminally undersubscribed. So go to Benonai's channel. There'll be links in the description that you can see, and you just go there quick, subscribe. And it's not, he doesn't spam anything. There's no junk on his channel. It's pure Pantheon lore. It's the best stuff.
Well, Pantheon lore and a bit of theory crafting, to put it lightly. Sure. And his own work as well, which it's all good stuff. And then the other thing that Ben and I put out was Saga of Strangers, the story of the Elves, and this is a real treat because, it recounts the story of the Elves, pretty quickly as well. Now the first thing is, as he puts it, it's done in a style of alliterative poetry, and I think that hits it pretty good. I love that it's his version. Like, he's not just reading the race page. Nothing against that, right? But I love that it's kind of his interpretation. It gives a little bit of a different perspective. And the other thing is, like, Ben and I are just so talented. I feel like every video he puts out, he like picks up a new accent.
Yeah, that's true. He does. Yeah, and he actually pulls it off too. It's not. Yeah,
he pulls it off pretty well.
Yeah,
he kind of like negs himself to be like, Southern guy. Sorry to all the Scots people, but like, I think he pulled it off pretty well. But anyway, Ben and I, great stuff. Go check him out. Especially the summaries like these, I think, are particularly valuable. Because I know not everybody's got time for the full readings and stuff, and these get you in the zone really quick and with the general things you need to know, so that you can skip all of the dialogue when you get in game. So
yes, exactly. Drac style, skip the dialogue.
Not to get on that bandwagon again. So before we get going on that, I'll just say that's it for this episode's Community Spotlight.
2 moons in the sky, I can climb up so high. Mysterious things, perception things, Therek's rainbow. We can go anywhere. Group adventuring, explore everything. It's Therek's rainbow. Anything. Tales to grow, it's the lore on Therek's Rainbow.
Therek's Rainbow.
Therek's Rainbow.
Therek's Rainbow.
All right. Yes, Therek's Rainbow. Again, we are back for another lore reading. This is again from More Than Shadows Part 1, which they released earlier, late last month. And the next part is coming up June 20th, actually, so not that far away. But we only got through the first half of my recording of it last time, so we're going to play the second half of that. So just to sort of recap the story, you've got Tove Dios climbing up the Daedrum Ascent with his daughter Geechee on his back in sort of a makeshift cocoon backpack kind of thing. He's reached the apex of the summit, an archway that sort of takes him to the final destination, but he's pausing now and sort of reflecting on a childhood memory. And this is where the tone shifts from the dark and stormy climb that he's doing to a more sunny and bright time in his life as a child when he explored this, and what he did that the Daedrum owe him a debt, which he is intending to claim. And you'll find out in this how he accrued that debt. So listen as I read the words of J.N. Gerhardt, Pantheon's lead writer, in More Than Shadows Part 1. As a boy, Tove rarely saw a boulder he did not try to scamper over, a tree he did not try to climb up, or a creature he did not try to tame. In the early days of the village known as Nesthaven, he and his companions would run through the lush valley that humans from elsewhere on Terminus ignorantly called the Dead Foot. One dim yet still humid morning, young Tove left even his most ambitious companions behind. His mind was set upon exploring the myth-laden Daedrum Ascent, a mountain said to be the habitation of a fanatical dragon cult. Despite his age, Tove was seasoned enough to pack supplies, bringing food, water, and tools for the journey. Just as Sirius was rising above the waters of the sea, he reached the base of the mountain, pushed on by an enthusiasm that outpaced even the wisest of fears. Throughout the hours of the morning and into the day, Tove cut a path over jutting rocks, between narrow clefts, higher and higher, pausing only to drink in the beauty of the valley laying between the ascent and the hills far beyond Nesthaven. Small plumes of smoke drifted up from his village, its buildings reduced to freckles in an elbow of the terrain. Everything Tove had ever known of the world was before his eyes, in a cradle between the mountains and the sea. The towering Yulon trees stood like ageless citadels, born hundreds if not thousands of years ago before his people came to this planet. The swooping majesty of the Kroon, draconic birds whose wingspan could block out the rays of Sirius, yet now gliding small as insects from his vantage. Even in the golden daylight, Tove could see the ghosts of ancient giants amidst their ruins, bluish hues radiating somberly as they drifted alone to the songs of their departed people. Thereafter, he came to the infamous arch. In the noon of his childhood, he remembered nearly sprinting across it, lifting his hands to feel the winds rushing up from the seas below. On the other side, he rested, drinking from a water skin, his throat parched from heavy breathing. Just as he fashioned the skin to his side, he heard the cries of a creature echoing from up ahead. In a cleft around the bend, Tove came upon a Kroon sheltering itself beneath its own wings. Yet this was unlike any Kroon he'd seen nesting in the valley, or even those he'd spied soaring over the seas and out from the lower cliffs. This creature was of greater size, with silvered feathers and a twin crest that curved out from either side of its head like a crown. Its cry was a melodic echo, utterly unlike the squawking caws of its lesser kin. This beast was the king of Kroons, and it was bleeding badly. At first, Tove could only see patterns of bloody feathers marking the rocks around him, but soon he saw a pool of blackened blood sticking to the creature's taloned feet. There he saw the culprit, a terrific sea serpent, far larger than he'd ever seen before, coiled around the Kroon's leg. Its fangs were buried into the bird's breast, tearing great, gaping holes as the Kroon wrestled to end its life. What had once been a waterfall of blood had slowed to twin trickles, but the beast was no better for it. It was dead unless treatment was swift and powerful. The Kroon acknowledged Tove's approach with a pained shriek. Whatever its normal course, the creature seemed to understand it had few choices left to make. The serpent was on the edge of death as well. Yet Tove could see it following his movements with one glassy eye, even as it kept its fangs dug into the flesh of the Kroon. The bird moved closer to Tove, and he raised his hands as if to grasp something, anything, of the bird. He would pray over it with the incantations of Coursera, the few he could remember. Yet, as he searched his mind for those words, the serpent released its death bite on the Kroon and sprang at Tove with a hideous hiss. Before Tove could move, the Kroon bit down and sliced off the serpent's head, finally able to access her foe's vulnerability. The bird gave a victorious cry, then fell silent upon the stone cliff. Tove rushed to the bird's wounded side, pressing his hands into the flow of blood and fumbling over the incantations. He wept and cursed as he failed to recall the scriptures, failed to know if they even pertained to birds and beasts such as this.
No, Coursera.
He cried in agony to the Keeper of the Holy.
No, please help me remember. Help me remember.
His adolescent voice cracked in desperation, a wave of despair falling with the last few breaths of the kingly Kroon, dying beneath his impotent hands. Then it came to him, the voice of his mother, the words of the holy book, not spoken but sung, sung over and around him all his life, in words he barely understood. Yet he knew them. He knew them and believed them in their virtue. Before he could wipe his eyes or hands from blood and tears, the words flowed through him in a trembling song, and a power beyond his plight mended the beast before his eyes. There was a flash of lightning, filling Tove's eyes with white before returning his mind to the night of his climb with Kichi. He had passed over the stone arch only just before the strike had occurred. He turned back to look, as if needing assurance that he'd truly done it. Whatever fearlessness lived in that boy of his youth, the man in him had become all too accustomed to living with fear. "Father," Kichi pressed. It was evident from her tone that the girl had called to him more than once. It was then he saw the figure on the other side of the stone arch. Motionless, eyeless, yet facing directly at him. Everything about the creature was dark. Even the flashes of lightning seemed unable to illuminate its form. It was as if its shadow disobeyed the light, dimming the air around its form so it could not be seen. "Father," Kichi pleaded, blind to what he could see. Tove was frozen in place, whether by charm or terror he could not say. His arms and legs may as well have belonged to another body. Then he perceived a change in the figure. Amidst the consuming darkness of its form, somehow he knew. The thing was grinning at him. "Quiet," Tove whispered to Kichi. "Be quiet and close your eyes." Then he began to run. And that is the lore. I cannot wait, Desrin, for part 2. I know you feel the same way.
I do.
Right?
Yeah, I do. And it's coming right
man.
up. We'll definitely be going through that next episode, right?
Definitely be going through that next episode. So that's the end of the show. Just a quick reminder as well. Again, next week, Parting the Veil, Desrin and Mana Rohan, possibly Nathan, doing Pantheon plus U2 after Parting the Veil to talk about it. We got the newsletter coming up June 29th from VR. That'll have the roadmap, maybe an updated roadmap in it. So check that out. If you are new here, please subscribe to the channel. Please share the podcast with folks in your circles to try and get it out, help people grow the community, help us, get this out there and just grow our channel as well. So thank you everybody for spending your Sunday with us. We really appreciate it. We're sorry we were gone for 3 weeks. We'll be back in a couple weeks, so sooner than that. And we will see you all then.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Pantheon Plus Rewind. Pantheon Plus is not affiliated with Visionary Realms. Be sure to check out our Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube channels under the name Pantheon Plus. You can follow Therek at Pantheon Therek on Twitter, and Desrin at Desrin Does also on Twitter. And you can stay up to date with all things Pantheon at www.pantheon.plus. Until next time, cheers, and thanks for listening.